Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, share our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 82, The Taxman Cometh. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell wants the cast of his new show to appear on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, so Cece volunteers the Sheffields to dog sit his chihuahua, Harley. Fran offers to take responsibility for the house guest, only to be slammed by an IRS audit. Fran tries to use her sex appeal to convince the IRS agent to drop the audit, but to no avail. She ends up receiving a $5,000 tax bill, which distracts her from her dog-sitting responsibilities, leading to Chester impregnating Harley. Fran worries that she's going to jail, so Maxwell helps her with her appeal. The case ultimately gets dismissed by the appeals officer after Maxwell relies on his show business connections to arrange a surprise visit by none other than Jay Leno. However, not all's well that ends well. Jay Leno cancels the cast's appearance on his show after learning about Harley's pregnancy. Meanwhile, Brighton is more excited to spend time with the IRS agent than Maxwell because he feels that he has nothing in common with his father, leaving Fran to repeatedly reassure Maxwell that this is just a phase. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yeah, so we open up in the Sheffield living room. Maggie, Fran, Gracie, and Niles are there. Well, and actually, Fran's walking in. She looks at Maggie and says, "What are you wearing? I can't let you go out in that short little top." And then Niles comments, "Mr. Sheffield's not here." So she's like, "Oh, it's gorgeous." Like she totally flips her tune.
Mm-hmm.
And she even tells Maggie not to stain it because she wants to borrow it.
Right.
And then she's asking about where Maxwell is. And apparently he's at Brighton school, talking about his job, like I forgot how they announced like career day. Yeah, essentially. And then Niles kind of makes the self-deprecating comment about like, he won't be there until it's "don't let this happen to you" day,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of his, job. So Brighton and Maxwell arrive home, and like Maxwell's very peppy, like very just like happy. He thinks it went great. He reenacted the history of musical theater, starting with the operatic beginning all the way to bring in the noise, bring
in the noise, bring in the funk.
Bring in the funk, yeah. And so, of course, Niles says, must have brought down the house.
Correct.
Yeah. And Maxwell, again, is still, like, feeling great, and he asks Brighton, "So did your old man deliver or what, hey?" And then Brighton's just kind of staying there, and Maxwell pulls out of his briefcase, "Oh, I got that CD you wanted." And Brighton reads it, "Pearl Bailey. Oh, excited. I'll exchange it for Pearl Jam."
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Maxwell has gotten the wrong CD.
Correct.
And Brighton goes off, and Maxwell turns to Fran like, "What happened? Like, he used to worship me." And Fran's like, "When?" What is that? And as you mentioned in your summary, that Fran's trying to reassure Maxwell, "Oh, he's just going through a stage or a phase. He'll eventually outgrow it." Of course, the telephone has been ringing at this point because,
Mm-hmm.
she was saying, oh, wait, not yet. First, I think Cece walks in with her classic "hello, hello."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And,
well,
and
actually,
again,
so the phone rings before Cece shows up.
Okay. So, of course, Niles lets Fran know it's her mother, and she's like, "I'm not here." Like, she doesn't want to talk to her mother on the phone. So, again, contradicting her earlier statement about not wanting to talk to your parents as a phase that you eventually outgrow. So, Cece comes in with "hello, hello," and she has met with Jay Leno. And because again, they wanted their cast to open on the Tonight Show, and she's talking about how they had an instant rapport. He had a dog named Harley, and Cece's carrying something, and she's like, and I had this little fellow. And of course, it's pointed out she's not carrying Chester, it's a hat. And she's like,
Correct.
oh my God, if this is not my dog, I could have left this valuable hat in the cab.
Right.
And so, of course, at that time, doorbell rings, the cab driver's there. Was this supposed to be a tip? Holding out Chester.
Mm-hmm.
And Niles kind of says to Chester, why did you come back? 4 martinis, and she would have been walking around, walking the hat around town.
Mm-hmm.
So then Cece goes on to tell Maxwell that Leno needs someone to watch the dog because doesn't like the kennel or anything, and she's kind of like, I don't know why. Chester loves the kennel. Anytime I go pick him up, he's hanging on to the little bars for dear life.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell's like, please don't tell me that you offered to watch Jay Leno's dog. And just as a little background, at this point it's just Maxwell and Cece talking, but Fran's kind of in the background coming back towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And so Maxwell's like, it's bad enough, with this one always here begging and jumping onto my lap and rubbing up against me all the time. And Fran at this point is up next to Maxwell and smacks him on the arm. It's like, does everybody need to know our business?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the scene. Again, we're setting up here the whole Brighton and Maxwell plot, as well as the whole thing with Jay Leno. Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to the office?
Sure. So Maxwell's in the office, and I think Fran's walking by, or she walks in, and he thanks her for agreeing to take care of Jay Leno's dog, with her busy schedule and all. And she thinks he's being sarcastic. And she says, I don't appreciate you taking a pot shot at me. I mean, I work very hard around here. And he's like, I was being serious. And she's like, you're kidding. And at that point, they get interrupted by Gracie trying to get their attention. And Max is like, not now, we're busy. And she's like, but Daddy's like, sweetheart, we're working. And so she shrugs and shouts, they're working, Mr. Leno. And they're like, oh no, that's not what they meant.
Yeah.
Maxwell gets Jay and says he's so sorry, please come in. And Maxwell makes the mistake of asking Gracie about Niles' whereabouts. And Gracie volunteers that he taped Letterman last night and he's watching, and Maxwell's like, oh, thank you, get out of here.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Fran was left with Jay Leno, and so she's going to entertain him and says, oh, Mr. Jay Leno, I'm Fran Fine. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to bed with you. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, I used to get around and get out and around a lot. I don't really remember a lot of people. And he's like, and she's like, no, not like that, not to bed like that. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And she's like, although I must admit, I have fallen asleep before you were done. One of those jokes we wouldn't get as children.
Yep.
And Jay responds, well, as long as you don't fake a laugh, that guys really hate that. And so,
and did you notice though at that time that both Fran and Maxwell are awkwardly laughing, like kind of fake laughing?
Yeah, they didn't find it as funny as I guess the audience does. So Maxwell invites him to sit down, and Maxwell tells him, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have you here. Then he snarkily says to Fran, I'm still not sure about. And Jay Leno's like, thanks for taking care of my dog. And Fran's like, oh, no problem. My mom had one just like that. It lived in the wall. And then she changes subjects, and she asks him if he would mind autographing his book for her. And, she says something along the lines that I can't tell you how classy it is that you don't go around trying to hawk it like other celebrities. And he's like, oh yeah, I hate that. Meanwhile, he holds up his book directly to the audience to show them what his book looks like. And Fran's like, meanwhile, have you read this one? She pulls out Enter Whining, which is the book by Fran Drescher. It's a riot. Plus, it just came out on audio cassette. And Jay Leno's like, I can't believe they put this voice on audio. She's like, well, some people find it soothing, which is exactly what she said previously.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
Would you like to take us to the kitchen?
Yes. So in the kitchen, we have Fran and Yetta with the two little dogs. So we have Chester, and then we have Jay Leno's dog, which is, sorry, I just lost, Harley.
Harley, yeah.
And so Fran's like, oh, look, it's just like Lady and the Tramp, because they have like some pasta in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
But then she adds, only Tramp had the good taste not to lick himself in front of Lady. She's kind of talking to Chester. And then Yetta's talking about, it reminds her of her dog, Al. It couldn't do it, like he had this stupid pug face, always drooling, gas that was emitted from that animal, like she couldn't even describe. That was Grandpa.
Uh-huh.
So we then learn, because Niles comes in and he has a letter, and it's for Fran, and it's from the IRS, and she's going to get a tax audit. And she's like, why are they always picking on me? Like, why? And Niles points out, like, you declared an adopted foreign child named Haagen-Dazs.
Mm-hmm.
And then, she spent quality time with that little bundle of joy. And she opens the freezer and kind of yells into it, Mama loves you, baby.
Yup.
Closes it. Brighton comes in. Fran kind of shows him the IRS letter. Do you know about this? And
did you note what she called him?
No.
Her accountant.
Yes, yeah. Because as we learn, Brighton's involved in the accounting aspect of all this. Meanwhile, like, Maxwell is still like very excited, trying to connect with Brighton. He comes in and he has like bike helmets. And did it come across to you like the bike helmet he had on was kind of juvenile looking?
I'm not sure juvenile looking. It just wasn't a good fit for him.
Mm-hmm. And he's trying to say like, hey, maybe we could, that girl you like, maybe we couldn't ride by her house. And Brighton's just like, what? And Fran's like, what? And then Brighton also makes the comment, maybe we can go to the duck pond so we can drown in it. But Fran tries to intervene and tries to come up with a way to get Brighton out of it by saying that, oh, Brighton, aren't you planning on going to Arnold's with Ralph and Potsy?
Mm-hmm.
And apparently neither Brighton nor Maxwell have ever seen Happy Days, because Maxwell's just like, oh, can I join you?
Right.
And like they get him though not to go, and then he leaves, and Brighton of course turns to Fran is like, who's Potsy?
Right.
And Fran's upset, calls him an ingrate, like she doesn't like being put in that kind of position where she's making up lies on his behalf to Maxwell. And Brighton says, well, we have nothing in common. We're not even from the same country.
Exactly.
That is the scene. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay.
So we then have this really short little scene in the, like, I don't want to call it the foyer, but near the round table, near the door in the front of the house. And, Cece's there. I think she's reading some mail, and Niles comes out of the bathroom.
Oh. So before that, I'll just interject.
Oh,
there is
right.
a short
Yes.
montage.
Correct. I'm sorry. I skipped that. Would you like to describe it, or should I?
I can do it.
Go ahead.
So there's just like there's a short montage essentially of like Maxwell trying to bond with Brighton, and it's not going great. So the first thing is they're like trying to we see them coming out of the house and they're going to play football, but of course you come back, Brighton is holding his eye and is just wanting, he's just done. He's going in. Then we
Right. And
see
did
them
you
at the
notice
opera.
how quickly it was? Like, we see Niles sweeping one side of the step, and then like it flips to them returning, and he's still sweeping the step.
Yeah, it was a very quick thing. And then we see them at the opera, and of course Brighton falls asleep and kind of falls into the lap of the lady next to him. So like that lady um, beckons Maxwell to do something about it. And then the third little thing is their sauna. And of course, a larger, hairy gentleman ends up sitting next to Brighton. So Brighton's making some faces. So again, just a little montage of like Maxwell's attempts to bond with Brighton.
Correct. And I'll point out that the larger, hairy gentleman was also a bit older and took his towel off.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So thank you for adding that.
Yeah, no problem.
So that montage is what prompts Cece to ask Niles, what is this unnatural obsession Maxwell has with his children? I can count the number of days I spent with my father on one hand. To which Niles says, 7? Mm-hmm. And she laughs and he says, that's funny. And he's like, oh, thank you very much. He's like, really, he's proud of himself. And she's like, no. I mean, the fact that I'm really rich and you're cleaning toilets in a suit and tie and rubber gloves. Well, he gets her good. He says, well, you got me that time. And he pats her cheek with his rubber gloved hand.
Yep.
And then she walks off. And this was one of those things that I thought was odd. She walks off, like going back through the living room as if she's going back into the office instead of making a beeline for the bathroom to wash her face.
Mm-hmm.
Which would have been my reaction.
Yes.
All right. Would you like to take us to the audit?
Oh, okay. So the doorbell rings, and there is the IRS man. And of course, Niles is the one who answers the door, and he calls out to Fran about it. And she comes down the staircase dressed up, and she's feigning ignorance. Oh, is that today? As if she's not purposefully dressed up for the tax man.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn that the tax auditor is Josh Basson. And he kind of, points out her dress and remarks that he hopes that she didn't try to write it off.
Right.
And then, of course, Fran takes him further into the living room near the couches, and Brighton's there. And Fran's like, let me introduce you to one of my dependents. And Brighton immediately is like, all right, I admit it. I helped her with her taxes. But you know what? We used a solar calculator in the shade.
Right.
And yeah.
Which I didn't get. Did you get that?
So basically, in order for a solar calculator to work, you need like light.
Right.
Producing in the shade. So it was a faulty calculator, basically.
Oh, thank you. Because I did not get the joke. I was like, what does that have to do with taxes?
Yeah, okay, just basically that if there's any kind of if the math doesn't math, it's because they used a solar calculator in the shade.
Thank you.
And the tax guy is like trying to reassure him that only like the most flagrant kind of things would lead to jail time. And he asks, and what's your name? And Brent's kind of like, Potsy?
Mm-hmm.
And again, the tax guy is like trying to reassure them, like he doesn't know why everybody's all, concerned, but he saw Pearl Jam last week, and this catches Brighton's attention. And Brighton even like goes and tries to sit next to him on the couch. And he's like, you went to Eddie Vedder's house? And the tax guy's like, well, when I'm done with him, it's more like Uncle Sam's house.
Right.
And then Fran's still trying to charm Josh by say how good looking he is, and he has a sense of humor. And she's like, well, if I weren't married with six children, I'm gonna go feed the chinchillas. And Barton's like, what chinchillas? And she's like, the ones that we raise at an incredible loss. Schedule C, item 15.
Right.
So then Maxwell comes in, and he's still trying to kind of bond with Brighton and kind of like show off a bit, or like, I don't know, because he's talking about how they're trying to cast for a play about Gertrude Stein, and it's down to Maureen Stapleton and Sada Thompson.
Yep.
And he's like, sorry, what?
I said, yep, I'm agreeing.
And he says it's going to be a hot one. and Brian's like, first of all, who?
Mm-hmm.
And then he points to Josh, and he's like, this guy knows Pearl Jam. So obviously in Brighton's eyes, the tax auditor is cooler than his dad.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay. I know that there's like a brief thing in the hallway. Did you count that separately, or
I counted it together, but I can separate it out if you want me to.
Or I can just do it so that you're not stuck with
fine.
a short one.
That's fine.
So in the hallway outside of the living room, Fran is getting ready. Because Maxwell follows her to the hallway, and he's like just afraid of a phase, and Fran comments like, he's just trying so hard. And if you're trying too hard, that's kind of, that's not going to work. But of course,
you look desperate.
Yeah, she pulls off a sheet over a tray of food that she calls it Hungry Josh. And she tells Maxwell that the next time he goes through the living room, he needs to limp because he's her husband with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And she turns on some music in the living room, takes out the tray to Josh, and kind of like tries to enticingly show the food to Josh.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I don't, except I just feel like we can't overstate how hard Fran is trying to use her sex appeal.
Like, so obvious.
It's
so
like
blatant.
Awkward to watch. Yes. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
At one point when, after Brighton finds out that the agent just audited Pearl Jam, he like sits down next to him, and Fran's like, Patsy, you're blocking the view, and like tries to get him to move because of the way she's sitting, trying to sit alluringly. She dances with the tray of food. It's just like, it's uncomfortable to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Is all I'll say. All right, so I'll take us to the next scene where I believe in the kitchen, and Niles is in the kitchen, and Cece walks in holding Harley, and she asks, "What is this?" And he responds, "An annoying yapping dog holding a chihuahua." And then Fran comes in, "Oh, there's the doggy." And Cece chides her that, this mud is your responsibility. And Fran's like, "Well, I just put it down for a second. It was only because Gracie was going to scald herself in the tub." And Cece's here having none of it. Blah, 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 blah. It's not like those children you take care of. This is a valuable animal. So Fran takes Harley away from Cece and scolds Harley, saying like, "I've been looking everywhere for you. You're going to go and play with Chester." Ugh, what a mischheit she is. The good thing she's got a rich father. Well, needless to say, I think Niles catches her attention by saying, "There's another letter from your friend at the IRS." And Fran's like, "Oh, well, it must be a thank you note for the gorgeous midnight blue double-breasted Armani blazer I gave him." And Niles gives her a look because clearly it was his. And she's like, "Well, you were never going to fit in that again." And so she opens the letter all excited. And then her excitement is disappointed, shall we say, because he liked the blazer, but he wants something else. He wants an arm and a leg. This is a $5,000 tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
And as she's agonizing over it, Gracie comes in and says, Fran, you better come and see what Chester and Jay Leno's dog are doing in the dining room. And Fran doesn't even like look up at her, but grabs a paper towel and tries to hand it to her. Oh, sweetie, just pick it up. How big can it be?
Mm-hmm.
And Gracie's like, no. Remember what we saw those two lions doing on the Discovery Channel? Well, that gets Fran's attention. Well, I don't suppose they're eating a zebra. Oh. And so she runs in and we hear her say, Chester, how'd you get your little shirt off? And so she comes back in holding a naked Chester. You're going right upstairs, mister, and taking a cold shower. And you, miss, she turns to Harley, you only know him a week. What's your secret?
Mm-hmm.
And so, then she's talking to Niles about how, what am I going to do? I don't have $5,000. The government is going to do to me what Chester just did to Harley.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell walks in and she tells him, oh, it's terrible. And he's like, oh, what happened? Mr. Mooney's fired from the bank again. And she's like, ha, 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 good looking and funny. And he's like, how much do you owe? Because he sees right through her. $5,000. And he tells her to calm down because we're going to file an appeal. What kind of records have you kept? And she's like, oh, I don't know. A couple of Bee Gees, Captain and Tennille, the White Album. And like, Maxwell's like, no, tax records, Miss Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add? Or would you like to take us to Queens?
I will take us to Queens, to Sylvia and Morty's apartment. And we hear Sylvia on the couch, don't take the box. Schmuck.
Mm-hmm.
And she's apparently watching Let's Make a Deal. And Fran's like, why do you torture yourself rewatching this episode of You and Daddy? Apparently they had traded a trip to Paris for an ostrich.
Correct.
And then Sylvia does say, well, that was the best stew we ever had. And then we see kind of clips of the show, and Sylvia's dressed like Princess Leia.
Yep.
And Morty is dressed like Darth Vader. And of course, this is when they're given the option, either keep their trip to Paris or go with the box. And we finally hear Morty say, we'll take the box. Of course, he's covered as Darth Vader. So, and Sylvia's just like, oh, I can't watch. I'm sick to my stomach. And she takes a bite of the pastry or whatever. So she leaves. So then we have Maxwell and Fran still, now kind of settling on the couch. And we find that Fran has kept her previous records in different purses, marked 95, 97, 93, or sorry, 94, 93. And in one of them, she finds an old Rolo. Oh, it's all white. Pops in her mouth. It's still good.
Correct.
And, Maxwell's just taking it back. These receipts are a disaster. And he like points out to her, like, you have 18 certified public accountants on your father's side alone. And Fran says, well, we have 17, I think she says neurologists.
Urologists.
Okay, that makes more sense because she says, and my dad still has 3 of something you're only supposed to have 2 of.
Correct.
So, yeah. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
I don't think so.
Okay, will you take us to the IRS?
Yes. So we're now at the IRS office, and in the room are Fran and Maxwell and Brighton and Josh, the IRS agent. And Brighton's trying to talk to him, saying, if we're found guilty, is there any chance I can do community service at a home for wayward girls? And Fran's like, don't talk to him. He comes into my home. He drinks my champagne that expressly says send to Lauren Bacall. And Maxwell gives her this look, and she's like, oh, what are you looking at, mister? You think that's supposed to scare me? I'm going to the big house.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh sort of tries to defend himself by saying that he was just doing his job. Shame on you for using your sex appeal to try to get out of paying your back taxes. And she's like, I most certainly did not. And shame on you for acting like it was working. And he's like, it was. When you get out of prison, would you like to have dinner? And she's like, no. Where?
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell tells her to basically stop wasting her time with him because he has nothing to do with it at this point, because everything's going to turn on what the appeals officer says. And at that moment, in walks a man who gets a round of applause. And he starts by saying that he has never seen such a total disregard for the tax laws. And Maxwell says to him, "Excuse me, sir, but is this going to take long? You see, I have to get back to the theater." "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm Maxwell Sheffield. Oh, you're the Broadway producer." And then he starts with his first impersonation of Carol Channing singing A Kiss on the Hand.
Diamonds Are a Girl's
Best Friend. Yeah, because thank you. It's like, I have the lyrics, not the song. And he's like, "I've always wanted to be in show business. Would you like to see another one?" And there's like this awkward look between Fran and Maxwell. And he's like, "Oh, did I mention that I'm the appeals officer?" And they're like, "Oh, yes, of course. We'd love to see another." And he's like, well, if you insist." He pulls out his glasses and pretends to be George Burns. "I got into heaven and I saw God and he wasn't feeling well. He sneezed. I didn't know what to say." And then, that's the end of his impersonations for the time. And then he's like, "All right, let's get down to business. Now, I've reviewed the case and I have to agree with my colleague, Mr. Basson, that you look very fetching in that skirt." And Fran's like, "Oh, thanks." And she says to Maxwell, "You can go." So he starts packing up his papers. And the appeals officer says, "However, this doesn't have any impact on my decision about your taxes." And Fran's like, "Where are you going? Where are you going? Sit down. Where do you think you're going?" So, then we sort of, I don't know when you want to cut the scene, but
you can keep going if you want.
Okay. So the camera sort of cuts and then we're still in the same office, same cast of characters, but Brighton gets up like he's going to leave. And Fran's like, "Where do you think you're going?" And he's like, "Fran, this," holding up a big soda cup. "This is inside of me."
Yeah. Was this like gas station, like big?
Yeah, it looked like really big, which explained why he was going to the bathroom, and that Fran was not going to stop him. So they're now looking at Fran's taxes, and the appeals officer sees, I think, was it $86 or something for apricot facial scrub, and so Maxwell's like sifting through papers as if that's going to help him. And says, "Well, you see, as a professional caregiver, Miss Fine needs to glow and be dewy." And Fran says to him, "Why don't you just slap the cuffs on me now?" And he's like, "Oh, relax. I've got something up my sleeve." And she's like, "Unless it's $5,000 tied to your forearm, I ain't interested." And well, guess what? Timing is everything in life. In comes Jay Leno, who is not particularly happy at Maxwell. "You make me schlep all the way down here to pick up my dog. Then your driver says, 'Oh no, the dog's already at my house. Look, I'm not one for star treatment, but do you know who I am?'" And well, the appeals officer certainly does. "Jay Leno, Jay, hey, I watch the Tonight Show all the time." And Jay is not thrilled. Great. And well, the appeals officer tries to, impersonate him. "Oh, watch." Actually, I should say, I thought he was imitating Jay Leno.
Yeah. I think he was.
And
like an opening monologue.
Right. That's exactly what I thought. Okay, good. We're on the same page. And so he like stands with his like chest kind of puffed up and he's like, "It was so cold in Los Angeles this morning." And Fran and Maxwell are like, how cold was it?" And he continues, "An exhibitionist came up to me on Wilshire Boulevard and described himself to me." And Fran and Maxwell do that really awkward fake laugh. Jay Leno's like, "Don't quit your day job." And the appeals officer is like, "Have you ever been audited?" Well, guess what? That changes Jay Leno's mind. And he's like, "I heard something in your voice. You are very good. We haven't an impressionist on the show in a really long time. Why don't we have a cup of coffee? Let's talk about an appearance for you." And well, "Sure," says the appeals officer. "That would be great." And case dismissed. Well, needless to say, Josh is not thrilled. He considers this outrageous, and he says to Fran that she should have gone to jail. And he complains to Maxwell about how he used his slick showbiz connections to make fools of the government. "I hope you're proud of yourself, Sheffield." And Maxwell's like, "Yeah, I am." And Brighton, of course, has heard just this last part. He's like, "Go, Dad." And Maxwell's like, "Oh, so you like your old man now, huh?"
Well,
Listen,
what did he call him?
the bad boy of Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And so Maxwell asks him, do you want to take in a movie? And Brighton is not interested. And he's like, I'd love to, but I'm going to the movies with Julie from my class. And at first, Maxwell suggests that he could join them. And then Fran gives him one of those looks like, you're making a fool of yourself. Stop it.
Yeah.
And so Brighton leaves. And then it's just Fran and Maxwell. And Maxwell tells her that he cleared the whole afternoon for this. And well, it's still early. So I thought maybe you and I could do something really sinful. And she's like, oh, Mr. Sheffield, you are clairvoyant. And he's like, what do you say about a pizza with everything on it? It's uncanny, is her response. Like, she was so excited about him being clairvoyant and then so disappointed.
Oh,
Do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us back to the house?
Yes. So in our final scene of the episode, we are in the living room. Fran's sitting there, and Maxwell comes in, and he's like, "Do you know anything about Jay Leno's dog's pregnancy or getting pregnant?" And she's like, "That depends. Like, if you're happy or mad about it." And Maxwell says he canceled our cast's appearance on the show. Oh, well, so then she doesn't know because clearly it's not a good thing.
Correct.
And he's like, how could you let this happen? And she's like, I just came too late and Chester came too early.
Mm-hmm.
Again, something we would not have picked up on as children.
Correct.
And then, pointing out that, and then like they're talking about animals, right? And, this is what separates humans from the dogs about, controlling the animalistic
passion.
And she's like, oh yeah. And so she starts like tickling, rubbing like Maxwell on his stomach. So he starts like kicking his leg like a dog would if you're rubbing his belly.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's the episode. Do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to talk about before we get into our shticks?
I mean, I would like to say though, I'm with Josh on this one.
A little bit, yeah.
Like the principle of the thing, like not letting the rich just get away with their connections.
Correct.
So
the one thing I want to say is I recently watched part of the first season of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and early in the series is an episode where Mary gets audited. And in my head, while I was watching it, I kept thinking about this episode of The Nanny and the similarities in that there's an IRS agent who goes to the house instead of just sending a letter and being like, please provide the documentation for what you've submitted. And like what I would assume is inappropriate behavior in commenting on other audits that are being conducted. And I would also say an inappropriate personal, shall we say, interest in the person being audited in both instances. And it was just, it just struck me as strange, like that this is a apparently not infrequent plot point on sitcoms. It just never would have occurred to me. And how it's how it's in a strange way romanticized.
Yeah. Well, and also I think it's odd that like Brighton's a part of everything, because even though he's quick to admit he helped Fran do her taxes on a solar calculator in the shade, like he's a child, like he's a minor. Like, why would he be dragged down?
That's a very good point. And I will also say before we get into our shticks, there's some things about this episode that don't make a lot of sense, and that's one of them. Particularly in light of Maxwell's comment to Fran, like, you have 18 certified public accountants on your dad's side alone. Why wouldn't she have used literally any one of them?
Especially when she's not afraid to have her family do things, right? She's constantly bringing them up.
Correct. She's constantly hiring them to do things. As we saw in the episode, The Family Plumbing, she describes it as a sickness. And she says to her little cousin Tiffany that, she's sick. Oh, Uncle Sydney, the shrink. Like, she's constantly looking for ways to hire her relatives. There's that. And also, we've previously heard Cece saying that she was getting Chester fixed. So unless I'm truthfully not aware of the failure rate for neutering of a dog, but in a vasectomy for a male human has like maybe a 2% failure rate. So it seems highly unlikely that Jay Leno's dog would have gotten pregnant. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think those are the comments I wanted to make.
Okay. So let's go into favorite fashion. Did you have any favorite fashion this episode?
Honestly, I kind of felt like there were slim pickings in this episode.
Yeah.
I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say it's actually the dress Fran's wearing at the very end. It's like a black base dress with like red and orange, sort of like flames. I kind of like that. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't really have a favorite, I don't think, this episode.
Do you want to talk about there are a couple of outfits I think are worth talking about. One would be what Maggie's wearing in the first scene. The short little shirt with the tight skirt. It's like powder blue. I'm pretty sure I know how you feel about it, but did you like it? Would you wear it?
I would not wear it.
I figured that was the response. I would not either.
It seems very 90s. Like that powder blue color. I don't know. Took me back.
Fair. Frankly, I didn't think it looked that great on her either. Not that I'm criticizing the actress, but I don't think that's a flattering cut on anybody. I didn't care for that. I also think we should talk about what Fran wore for her audit. What did you think of it? Oh, and for those who haven't watched the episode recently, it's worth noting that it is a short dress. It has like tank top sleeves, but it's more of like a scoop neck. And basically just until like a little bit below the bust line, it's black. And then underneath that, it's like a dark red. And then there's a black trim on the bottom. And she had her hair up and curled, and she's wearing dangling black earrings. And of course, the sheer black tights and heels.
Yeah, it was interesting because in some respects, I don't think if her whole point was to like seduce in some way, like try to butter up the IRS, like all that kind of stuff. Like I think she has plenty of other dresses in her wardrobe that I think would be a little more suited to that.
I agree.
So
I agree wholeheartedly, because that was my thought as well. Like, for example, we in the middle, I think, of season 3, we saw that what she describes as the most fabulous dress she owns, right? And it's that red halter top that she wears on Valentine's Day when she thinks Maxwell has is her secret admirer. Like, why wouldn't she wear that? It's lower cut, it's tighter fit, it really pops. Or the dress she wore when she was when things were getting serious with the French tutor Philippe. Like she, as you put it, she had so many better options.
Yeah. So, is there other fashion that you wanted to discuss?
Just two other things. I thought it interesting that she's wearing a lot of black and yellow in this episode. So like when she gets the $5,000 tax bill, she's wearing like a yellow and black checkerboard jacket and matching pants with a black turtleneck. And then when she goes for the audit, she's wearing like a black and yellow skirt suit, I guess, or like matching outfit that made me think she looked like a bumblebee.
Well, she was also wearing all black and green.
Yes, she was. I didn't
checkers, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't. The black and green outfit I think you're thinking of is in the first scene where she's wearing the black turtleneck and then like the green floral dress with the matching headband, which I didn't think those went together very well. Like a white turtleneck would have been better. I don't know. I didn't care for the fashion in this episode, if that's not apparent.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Are we ready for some notable New Yorkers?
Absolutely.
So before we get fully into this shtick, I was looking at the title again, because, sometimes it's a reference to things. And my mind just went to the last scene about her talking about she came too late and Chester came too early. The Taxman Cometh. And I was like, oof. Did you think that was a reference to anything in particular?
I didn't, but now that you've said that, I Googled, and the first thing that comes up is an episode of Murder, She Wrote, that aired in 1991. It was season 7, episode 15. And the summary from our friends at IMDb is, and I quote, "An IRS-plagued woman may have killed her informer husband," end quote. So maybe it's a toss back to that.
Maybe. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, maybe it's just combining, like, different elements of this episode by talking about the Taxman, but also the Cometh part. Anyway, moving on. So, again, in the first scene, we have that, well, okay, did you know, like, were you able to pick up the specific for Bring Into Noise, Bring
Into Funk? Yeah, it was a 1995 off-Broadway musical that actually moved to Broadway in 1996. It ran for 1,135 performances. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Pearl Bailey?
An American actress, author, and singer whose career began in vaudeville before transitioning to Broadway. She received a Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1988 before dying in 1990. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Pearl Jam.
A Seattle, Washington-based band that began performing in 1990 and was inducted actually into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017. That's according to our friends at pearljam.com.
Jay Leno.
An American actor, comedian, TV host, and writer who's best known, or at least in my mind, best known for hosting The Tonight Show.
And they specifically even mentioned The Tonight Show.
Correct. Oh, you mean The Tonight Show. It's a late night talk show.
Yeah.
Which I think we've talked about previously, but I'm not certain.
Yeah. Well, then they reference Letterman, who I believe we've talked about before.
We have, yeah. He would be Jay Leno's competition. Late night comedy.
Yeah, so of course Maxwell wouldn't necessarily want Jay Leno to overhear that that they are taping Letterman instead. So Jay Leno, obviously it's very clear that he's on this episode to promote his book. I hate that. Shows it very obviously to the audience. I didn't catch the title of it. Did you?
I realize now that I didn't either.
Okay. Well, he has a book.
I believe it was Jay Leno, Leading with My Chin.
Okay. And then, as you mentioned, then Fran also shows Enter Whining.
Correct. Which
is her book.
Correct.
Then there's a reference to Lady and the Tramp.
So I borrowed the description verbatim from our friends at IMDb. The romantic tale of a sheltered uptown Cocker Spaniel dog and a streetwise downtown mutt.
And then for any of our listeners who may be outside of the U.S., the IRS.
Oh, that's a good addition. I didn't grab that one, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's short for the Internal Revenue Service. So they're part of the U.S. federal government, and they're responsible for collecting federal taxes and administrating the Internal Revenue Code. I know, like, other countries, I think, do taxes a bit differently than the U.S. does.
That's true.
Essentially, you don't want the IRS knocking on your door.
Right. Americans have to calculate their own tax liability and hope they did do it right.
Yep. So other, just to clarify, Haagen-Dazs. It's a type of ice cream.
It is that we've talked about before. It was founded in the Bronx, New York in 1976.
Then, like I mentioned, there is, Fran refers to going to Arnold's and meeting up with Ralph and Potsy. So that is a Happy Days reference.
Correct. Happy Days was an American sitcom that aired from 1974 to 1984 and presented an idealized version of life in the Midwest in the 1950s and early 60s. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And then while there's that montage of like Maxwell trying to bond with Brighton, there's a song playing, and it's Harry Nielsen. It's like, people tell me about my best friend. I don't know what the name of it. That was a best friend.
Best friend. It is Best Friend.
Okay.
Also interesting. That was the theme song from The Courtship of Eddie's Father, according to our friends at Genius.com.
The Courtship of Eddie's Father.
That it was the theme song from it.
Okay. But yeah, so that's what's kind of playing on in the background during that that montage. Now there is then a specific reference to Eddie Vedder, who is a part of Pearl Jam.
Correct.
And then also a reference to Uncle Sam's house. So again, just in case you're not familiar with like the lingo, Uncle Sam is the federal government. And then we have the whole Gertrude Stein, who I think has come up before.
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe not.
She was an American writer and art collector who was known for her Paris salons, where leading artists and writers were able to meet. And that was according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Maureen Stapleton.
She was an American actress who was known for winning a BAFTA for her role as Emma Goldman in Reds. She won the BAFTA for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And then Seda Thompson.
Also an American actress, but she is known for her role as Kate Lawrence in Family. That's according to our friends also at Wikipedia.
The Discovery Channel.
I think has come up before, but if in case it hasn't, it's a Warner Brothers owned cable channel. That's also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
The Bee Gees.
A 1958 founded musical group that featured brothers Maurice, Robin, and Barry Gibb, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Captain and Tennille.
They have come up before.
They have.
Yeah, they were a husband and wife team with 5 certified gold or platinum albums and popular singles Love Will Keep Us Together, Do That to Me One More Time, and Muskrat Love. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
The White Album.
The Beatles' 9th studio album, which was actually titled The Beatles and released in 1968. It was their only double album, which was sold in a plain white sleeve, hence the name, The White Album, or nickname. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Was Mr. Mooney fired from a bank a reference?
I didn't know what it was.
Okay, that's why I kind of glossed over that. Then we have the Let's Make a Deal.
Oh, I guess the Mr. Mooney fire, I just Googled it. It's from the Lucy Show.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
According to our friends at IMDb. Sorry. So Let's Make a Deal was a game show that debuted in 1963 that involved traders making deals with the host, including choosing whether to trade something of value for a different but unidentified item. As that's according to our friends at Wikipedia, and just from the clip on the Nanny, we understand it now.
Yes.
Don't take the box.
Yeah. Well, and then Sylvia was, as I mentioned, dressed up like Princess Leia, and Morty was dressed up as Darth Vader from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
The Rolo is a type of candy, like a chocolate, not chocolate. Well, as like caramel. How would you describe it?
Well, according to our friends at Hersheyland.com, it would be a creamy caramel covered in rich chocolate candy.
There you go. We have yet another reference to Lauren Bacall. I feel like we've had a reference to her before.
I think we did back in season 1.
Mhm.
An American actress known for her alluring, sultry presence, her distinctive husky voice. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mhm.
And
And
I
so,
quoted that.
yeah, as you mentioned, whenever the appeals officer walks in, there's a round of applause. So he is played by Rich Little.
Correct. I looked at his IMDb profile, and did you recognize anything he's been in? Or did you
Well, I
recognize
just
him in
like
anything?
scrolling down, it appears that he was, frequently on various variety and talk shows. And so
Mm-hmm.
he used to be on the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson,
Mm-hmm.
looks like. So I guess that's kind of like that kind of fits, I guess, with Jay Leno being there, just in terms of like the late night talk show
Mm-hmm.
connection.
Right.
But so yeah.
So he did some impersonations, including Carol Channing, who we
Hmm.
definitely have talked about because she guest starred in the second episode of The Nanny. She was famous for her role as Dolly in Hello Dolly, and according to IMDb, she guest starred on the Magic School Bus, the Addams Family TV series, and the Drew Carey Show.
Hmm. And
Uh,
as you mentioned, they were singing "A Diamond Is a Girl's Best Friend."
which was originally sung by Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, sorry, I kept expecting
Sorry.
you to jump in, and it's fine. Um, he also impersonates George Burns, who is an American actor, comedian, singer, and writer who is involved in vaudeville, radio, film, and television. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. And then I don't.
I have one more.
One more. What is it?
Wilshire Boulevard. It's apparently a prominent boulevard in Los Angeles that goes east to west. It's a real place.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. I think we got everything.
Lovely listeners, if we missed any, let us know.
Hmm. So on to Yiddishikop.
So we have a couple. So I'm going to start with some of our familiar terms, which as we're all learning Yiddish together, it's good to review. Schlepp, it means to haul or carry, or it's a tedious or difficult journey. Schmuck, we've covered before. It's a vulgar Yiddish term for penis. It's roughly translated to mean a stupid or foolish or detestable or obnoxious person. Basically, if someone calls you a schmuck, not a good thing.
I guess not a compliment.
We have a new word this week, miskite, which basically means someone or something that is ugly. And that's according to our friends at jewishlanguages.org, which makes sense why Fran calls Harley that, because Harley thinks she's too good to play with Chester. And then the last thing is ostriches are not kosher. Just in case anyone was curious, they are not kosher. The birds that are kosher are the ones that are listed in the Bible, and they include things like ducks, chickens, turkeys, not ostriches. So,
Okay.
in case anyone was surprised.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay. So then are we ready for 90s nostalgia?
I believe we are.
Okay. There's actually a bit here.
All right. Would you like to start?
Yeah. Just again, Maxwell getting Brighton the CD. These days you don't buy as many CDs. It's mainly streaming at this point.
Correct.
Unless you're a diehard fan. Fans still buy CDs, but
and even then, they might not buy a physical CD. They might buy the MP3s.
Yeah, there are certain fandoms though that will buy the physical, but still, and it's funny too though because these days there's been a resurgence in the popularity of vinyl records as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but just like his dad getting him the wrong one. And then like Pearl Jam itself takes you back to the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously they're like still around and stuff, but that seems like a very like, yeah.
Well, on that note, Pearl Bailey died in 1990. So my guess is popularity has decreased since then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll let you take a turn.
The audio cassette.
Yep.
Enter Whining being released on audio cassette.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think books are still released on audio cassettes. I think they're now just audiobooks that you download from the internet.
Yeah. I think they still have like the option to buy CD versions, but not cassettes.
Correct.
And I think the majority of people just like you said, download it and stream it from like their phones.
Mm-hmm. I'll throw out another. Old cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I don't know in the 90s to what it, because like these days you can use certain programs on your computer to help you do your taxes.
I think in the 90s you had a pen and paper or a
Yeah.
pencil and paper.
Yeah. Well, I think my mom still does that to this day. But I mean,
some people still do.
they just like to do it by hand. But these days, you know, I always use a program.
Yeah, me too. Jay Leno hosting the Tonight Show. Not really 90s nostalgia, but it is sort of dated because like he stepped away from it, then he went back to it. Now I think he's done with it.
Yeah. Yep. It was this sounds really stupid, but like
this is a safe space. Our podcast is a safe space.
Our stupidity. No,
yes.
So like Maxwell like putting on the helmet and like trying to ride bikes with Brighton. I mean, that takes me back to my childhood. So like,
he didn't want to ride bikes. He wanted to learn how to rollerblade.
Oh yeah, rollerblading especially seems very 90s to me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know there's been kind of a resurgence on like certain social media platforms with skating, but those are usually like not the blades.
Right.
But yeah. So anyway, it just seemed very 90s to me. And then again, like, is it just a sitcom thing to have the IRS come to your house? Because that seems odd. Again,
I think so.
Like, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
I'm out.
Okay. So, unfortunately, we can't add to the kiss count this week. We were spoiled. But
no, unfortunately, we cannot.
Surprisingly, we can't add to the ATT after the thing count.
I know. I found that particularly disappointing.
So we are now at Future Fun.
So I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. We actually get to meet Morty and, see his face, hear his voice in season 6. And Fran helps him save his marriage because Sylvia may have been involved in an extramarital affair. What? I didn't say that part before. She was being pursued by a handsome, wealthy doctor. So we've got that to look forward to. We actually get to meet Morty. So Sylvia and Morty's failed appearance on Let's Make a Deal is not the only TV game show we get to see people be on. Maxwell actually gets to be a guest on Hollywood Squares in season 6. And it's notable for a couple different reasons. One, he fills in at the last minute for Andrew Lloyd Webber, and the host did not update the bio. So they read Andrew Lloyd Webber's bio and they're like, Maxwell Sheffield, what do you have to say for yourself? And he's like, that's Andrew Lloyd Webber's bio. And they're like, oh, awkward.
Yeah.
And it's also notable for the fact that Yetta comes to cheer him on, and she's dressed up as a chicken because that's what she wore to the last game show she attended. And so that's what she thought she was supposed to wear. She looks just as ridiculous as you can imagine. And then it's also notable by the fact that like the timing of it does not work out, because there's a very limited window where Maxwell's supposed to be doing something else very important at the time that he is guest starring on the Hollywood Squares. So there's that. Next week, we're gonna see Nigel. He'll be visiting New York, and I've said this before, but I'm really excited to talk about it with you next week, Bernadette. Nigel proposes to Fran next week.
Okay.
So, and then in 2 weeks, we go to Bermuda with the Sheffields, and Fran and Maxwell contemplate taking a swim. So
okay.
Yeah.
Fun. So then, are we ready for episode ratings?
I think we are. Is it your turn or my turn to go first?
It's my turn.
I love it when it's your turn.
I know. So, again, a little bit of difficulty figuring out, because to me, like, it was very, I mean, kind of kudos to the show for pointing out, like, it is a blatant, like, Jay Leno's appearance is him trying to hawk his new book. But also that makes it feel kind of like it's just a weird combination of Jay Leno and a tax audit.
Yeah.
And
throwing the pregnant dog.
Yeah, and a pregnant dog. I mean, it feels like someone just like picked slips of paper out of a hat. Like, okay, let's create a story with these different elements. And again, it's kind of weird that Brighton was dragged along with them as a minor. So, and I mean, to be fair, what was his name? Jason?
Yeah, Josh. Yeah, see, he's so memorable. He's so memorable.
Yeah.
We can't remember his name.
Sorry, Josh. I mean, to be fair, it is annoying when the rich get off.
Correct.
On things by using connections and all that stuff. But there was some fun banter with like Cece and Niles. Again, it's just the whole dog pregnancy is weird. All of this to say, I'm having difficulty rating it because it's not like the best, in my opinion. But
it's also probably not the worst. Yeah.
But I feel like I've liked some of the other episodes that I've given a 4 more. So like 3.5, subject to change.
That is fair. As our lovely listeners will remember, we reserve the right to change the rankings at the end of the season. So I do think I want to mention, since we didn't in our notable New Yorkers segment, Josh, the unnamed and totally forgettable IRS agent, was played by Dana Gold, according to our friends at IMDb. So, and he's appeared on other shows, including Seinfeld, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Disney's Doug, and others. So, yeah, so I sort of feel the same way you do. Like, there are a lot of things about this episode. You're right. Like, it does sort of feel like they just pull things out of a hat and we're like, let's just throw it together and see what happens. It didn't jive. It also didn't really make sense. Like, again, Chester was supposed to be neutered. Fran has all these accountants in her family. Why would she rely on Brighton of all people? Also, I really didn't like the joke where Maxwell asked her, what type of records did you keep? And she starts talking about music records. Because like that felt like they were dumbing Fran down. And like, obviously it's not like she's, she's not Einstein, but like she's not that dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with all of the love in the world for Fran Fine. She's like clearly my role model in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't care for that. I didn't really care for, like, we basically saw Maggie for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Gracie's has a very limited role, and Brighton is just like there. I didn't care for the plot that Brighton doesn't want to hang out with his dad. Like, I mean, that's just a normal, I think, developmental stage where teenagers don't really want to hang out with their family.
Mm-hmm.
But like Maxwell seemed to be taking it too seriously and trying too hard, and like in ways that I don't think most parents would do. So I didn't care for that. I feel like I'm basically just like listing all these things I don't like about it. But at the same time, like, parts of it were funny. I don't know. Like, there are other episodes that I clearly have liked better. This is not an episode that like I go out of my way to watch. As I've said, I didn't care for the fashion. I think I'm giving it a 2.5 because
Ooh, okay.
I'm really struggling because I don't hate
Then
it. I
I'm
don't
gonna
love it.
make mine a 3.
Okay, you're allowed to change your rating.
Even in the same episode.
Exactly. And also I'll put it another way. I'll add another thing to my list of reasons why I'm rating it so poorly. We have a lot of really good episodes coming our way, and just like I would much rather have spent the hour talking to you about like an affair to dismember, for example, or kissing cousins, or even the nose knows. Like, those are episodes coming in our future. So yeah, giving it a 2.5.
Okay.
I'll make my peace with it.
Is that like the lowest you've given any episode this season?
Yes.
Okay.
This season, yes. In the entire series, no, but it is towards the bottom.
Close to Oi to the World.
I think Oi to the World I gave that a 1.
I know, that's like your lowest one.
Yeah, that and Chatterbox. I gave it a 1.
Yeah.
So like I've given others, like I gave When You Pitch Upon a Star a 2. I originally gave The Butler, The Husband, The Wife, and Her Mother a 2.5, but then I revised that to a 4. So yeah.
So okay. Did you have anything else to say about this episode?
I do not. Do you?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 83, An Affair to Dismember.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.